In this video, I'm quickly going to discuss the new leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, and why I believe he's a very bad choice, unfortunately, and why, in many regards, he represents everything that cost us the election in 2019. So Keir Starmer is a multi-millionaire lawyer. He's a barrister. He was the Director of Public Prosecutions, which is basically the most senior position in the Crown Prosecution Service. He's only been an MP for 5 years, but his record in that time and his actions, unfortunately, have been a very, very mixed bag. And for certainly, he is much further to the right or centre than Jeremy Corbyn. And in my view, he's not a true socialist by any stretch of the imagination. Number one, Starmer was a part of the coup attempt against Jeremy Corbyn in 2016, a totally immoral and undemocratic attempt to get rid of a democratically elected leader of the Labour Party in a very immoral and wrong way, which was that they tried in a series of resignations in tandem to get rid of him by showing that they have no faith in his leadership. So they all resigned in tandem to get rid of him. It failed. People like Angela Eagle, Owen Smith, Luciana Berger, Hilary Benn, and so forth, Tom Watson, they resigned, and Starmer, who was Shadow Home Minister at the time, he also resigned. That is a disgrace. He should never ever have been given a position in the Shadow Cabinet. After that appalling behaviour. But one of Jeremy Corbyn's weaknesses is that he was far too kind to people who tried to undermine him. And if I was in government, that would never in a million years happen. But of course, the truth is that the Parliamentary Labour Party are much further to the right than the constituents and members of the Labour Party. The reason for that is complicated, but basically, we don't have mandatory reselection and we don't have open selections that would operate on the principle of one member, one vote, which is the way it should be. And after every 5 or 4 years, an MP does not have to be reselected. And so because we don't have those two things, it allows for right-wingers and careerist MPs and centrists to infiltrate and be a member of a party that ultimately they shouldn't really be a member of. They don't really, people like Starmer's a complicated choice, but I don't really believe that Starmer thinks that we should have a socialist-run economy where a vast proportion of it is planned, where we have common ownership of the means of production, so all of our utilities, our water, our telecoms and so forth are owned and run in common. I really believe that he wants our private enterprises to be run by workers, to have workplace democracy, cooperative ownership and so forth. I think that he's basically a liberal with mild social democrat tendencies. And so people like him and people that are much further to the right even than him have been able to stay in the Labour Party under this broad church banner. I would like to see, and I believe that I would like to see much more real socialist MPs like Jeremy Corbyn, who I do believe would want structural change to capitalism. But most of those MPs that I've just mentioned do not want structural change to capitalism. And so in my view, they're in the wrong party, because the Labour Party should want vast structural change to this system that is clearly the number one problem in our human relations, and that is capitalism. And that's another video. But basically, the Labour Party is undemocratic and permits these right-wing and centrist MPs to be members and to be MPs. So Keir Starmer supported the coup, and he supported Owen Smith, who is an ex-pharmaceutical lobbyist for Pfizer, who's a centrist MP, has very little in common with real Labour Party values. So if Keir Starmer was a true socialist, why did he support Owen Smith and be involved in that coup? That is a disgrace, and Jeremy Corbyn was wrong to allow him back in the shadow cabinet. Number two, he has surrounded himself with right-wing and centrist advisors, such as Alexandra Barros-Curtis, who is a political consultant and lawyer, who was heavily featured in Owen Smith's campaign of 2016. Well, as Aaron Bastani points out, he's involved with, or his company is involved with Keir Starmer's campaign. He's appointed Matt Pound as one of his political advisors during his campaign. Matt Pound is a strategist for Labour First, who are openly opposed to momentum, and they oppose all of the positive things that make Labour a real alternative party. They don't really want structural change to capitalism or mass common ownership. These are centre-right groups that broadly should not be within the Labour Party. Well, unfortunately, that individual has recently been working with Keir, and that is very concerning. And there are many others, like Chris Ward, who's a political advisor that's worked in Parliament for many years, that's worked with people like Chris Leslie, who's an MP who, on much further to the party's right than Corbyn, who was openly against Corbyn, who resigned last year and joined the independent group. Well, Starmer is being advised off Chris Ward. Now, all this is basically telling us that Starmer is trying to be the man for the right. He's trying to appease both those on the right and those to some degree on the left, but all this is strong evidence that he will bring the party closer to the centre and right. He's also recently been involved with a healthcare lobbyist, a private healthcare lobbyist that wants to open up the NHS to the market even more, so that money goes from frontline services into these fat cat chief exec salaries and shareholder profits, when we want, and Jeremy Corbyn wants, a completely nationalised health service without private enterprise being involved. Well, if you're getting advice from a healthcare lobbyist, what does that tell you? As Bastani points out in his excellent article on this, if you want to find out about an MP or a new, you have to look at who funds them and who is advising them. And unfortunately, it is a very, very poor bag for Keir Starmer. He has many right-wing appointments that should be concerning us.